In a move that's shaking up global politics, Donald Trump just slammed India with a brutal 50% tariff, sparking outrage in Delhi and panic among global trade analysts. Why? Because India wouldn't stop buying oil from Russia. Now, a former friendship between two world leaders has turned into a full-blown economic war. And what's coming next could affect nearly every major country on Earth, but how did it get this bad, and what does Trump really want? Nobody saw this coming, not even India. Out of nowhere, Donald Trump signed an executive order slapping a massive 50% tariff on all Indian imports to the U.S. That's not a typo, 50%. One of the highest trade penalties America has ever imposed on any country. And it wasn't over a broken deal or a trade dispute. It was over oil, specifically India's ongoing purchases of Russian oil. According to the order, these new tariffs will hit in exactly 21 days, on August 27th. And if that deadline sounds serious, it's because it is. Trump isn't just sending a message, he's drawing a line in the sand. With this move, Trump has triggered what could become a full-scale trade war with one of America's biggest allies. And the fact that he did it through a late-night executive order without warning, without diplomacy, has left both Washington and Delhi reeling. But this wasn't just about economics. It was personal. And Trump made that very clear. So why would Trump take such an aggressive step against a longtime partner? According to him, it all comes down to one thing: India's refusal to stop buying oil from Russia. And he's not sugarcoating his frustration. In a fiery statement, Trump claimed India doesn't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. That line wasn't just harsh, it was deliberately provocative. It framed India not as a neutral player, but as a country indirectly fueling the very war the West is trying to stop. From the White House, the message was just as sharp. Officials said that India's oil deals undermine U.S. efforts to hold Russia accountable. In their view, every barrel of Russian oil bought by India is a slap in the face to U.S. foreign policy and a direct threat to national security. But here's where it gets even more complex. The U.S. itself still does business with Russia. Not much, but enough to raise eyebrows. So is this really about principles or power? India didn't waste time responding, and their tone made it clear. This wasn't just business. This was personal. In a rare, blunt statement, India's foreign ministry called Trump's tariff unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. 3 words that don't just criticize policy, they question the very integrity of the U.S. as a partner. And then came the real warning: India will take all actions necessary to protect its national interests. That's not just diplomatic language. That's a threat, the kind you make when the gloves are off. But what stung the most? The sense of betrayal. Indian officials pointed out that it was the U.S. itself that once encouraged India to buy Russian oil, claiming it would help stabilize global energy markets when Europe was scrambling for supply. India didn't start this trade out of rebellion. It was a reaction to chaos. Now, Delhi feels like it's being punished for doing exactly what it was nudged to do. And worse, they're being singled out, even though other countries like China and Turkey are still buying Russian oil too. So why target India? Behind the scenes, officials are reportedly furious. And while India hasn't announced counter tariffs, yet insiders suggest retaliation is on the table, especially if this spirals any further. What's really happening here isn't just a spat between two countries. It's part of a much bigger power struggle. And Trump knows it. India isn't the only country buying oil from Russia. China, Turkey, and several others continue to import massive amounts, quietly fueling Moscow's economy while avoiding direct confrontation with the West. But with this move, Trump is sending a loud, unmistakable message to all of them: you're next. In fact, the White House made it clear that it's tracking all Russian oil buyers, and further actions are already being recommended to the president, which means the 50% tariff on India might just be the beginning. We could be staring down a future where any country that trades with Russia gets hit with crippling U.S. tariffs. That kind of policy doesn't just punish rivals, it disrupts global alliances. And the timing couldn't be more confusing. Just Hours before this announcement, Trump's top envoy was in Moscow, holding meetings that were supposedly aimed at negotiating peace in Ukraine. So what exactly is the U.S. strategy here? Is it pressure, diplomacy, or both at once? Because from the outside, it looks like the world's economic map is starting to split in two: those who follow America's rules and those who don't. And for countries like India, that's a dangerous crossroads. Not long ago, Donald Trump and Narendra Modi were calling each other friends on global stages. They smiled for the cameras, held massive rallies in each other's countries, and praised their unshakable bond. Trump even called Modi a great guy, and Modi called Trump my friend. But that political honeymoon is over. And what's unfolding now is a very public breakup. Despite the warm optics of past years, the Trump administration has repeatedly targeted India with trade penalties. This isn't the first tariff, but it's by far the most aggressive. And it's not just a numbers game anymore. It's emotional, it's strategic, and it's deeply personal. Trump has always viewed international relationships through a deal-making lens. You're either giving him what he wants or you're a problem. And in his eyes, India's oil trade with Russia makes it a problem. No matter the past friendship, no matter the shared photo ops, what's worse is that this shift in tone could signal a deeper fracture in U.S.-India relations. One that goes beyond Trump and Modi and into how both nations view their future alliances. Because when allies start turning on each other during global crises, it's not just diplomacy that suffers, it's trust. And once that's gone, it's hard to get back. Behind all the political drama, there's a brutal economic reality in India. Could be hit hard. Experts are already warning that the new 50% tariff could slash Indian exports to the U.S. by up to 50%. That's billions of dollars lost in just months. Key sectors like textiles, pharmaceuticals, and electronics industries that rely heavily on American markets are now staring down massive losses. And for Indian businesses, this isn't just a slowdown. It's an existential threat, but so far India is choosing restraint over retaliation. Trade experts and former government officials are urging calm, suggesting Delhi should wait at least 6 months before striking back. The idea? Don't make things worse while there's still a chance to negotiate. Still, the pressure is mounting. If the tariffs stay in place, public pressure inside India will grow fast. And if diplomacy doesn't work, India could retaliate. With tariffs of its own, targeting American companies operating in the country. Apple, Amazon, Boeing, none of them are off limits. Meanwhile, the uncertainty is already rippling through global markets. Traders are watching closely, allies are uneasy. And economists are warning that this single policy decision could ripple far beyond U.S.-India trade, affecting supply chains and energy deals across the globe. So the real question isn't just how India will respond. It's how long both sides can hold off before this turns into a full-blown economic war. As if the 50% tariffs weren't explosive enough, Trump isn't stopping there. In a chilling warning, the White House hinted that 100% tariffs could be next, not just for India, but for any country that continues doing oil business with Russia. That includes Turkey, China, and even U.S. allies in the Middle East. And if Trump follows through, we're not just talking about tension, we're talking about a massive rupture in the global economy. These so-called secondary sanctions are designed to squeeze Russia by isolating it completely from international markets, but the collateral damage? It could be devastating. Countries that depend on Russian energy could face crippling penalties, supply chains could fracture, and global inflation could spike again. Even more ironic, the U.S. itself still does limited trade with Russia. In fact, last year, American companies traded goods worth over $3.5 billion with Russian firms. So when Trump targets other countries for doing the same, it raises a difficult question. Is this about principle or power? And with Trump threatening to escalate further, the August 27th deadline may just be the beginning of a much darker Chapter 1, where diplomacy fails and economic warfare takes over. What started as a trade disagreement is now spiraling into something much bigger: a diplomatic standoff, an economic threat, and a global warning shot. With just one executive order, Trump has shaken the foundations of U.S.-India relations and opened the door to a potential worldwide trade war. India now stands at a crossroads: stay silent and risk being seen as weak, or fight back and risk making things worse. Meanwhile, other countries are watching closely, wondering if they're next in line for tariffs, sanctions, or public shaming. And then there's the August 27th deadline, the day everything changes. If Trump follows through with more penalties, or escalates to 100% tariffs, the global economy could tip into chaos. This isn't just about oil. It's about power, loyalty, and the fragile balance between diplomacy and dominance. And if this is how Trump handles his allies, it raises an even bigger question. What happens when the next global crisis hits and everyone's forced to pick a side?